Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Fidi for those of you who are new here. It is that time of month, which means it's time to do my September wrap up. I'm a little bit late again and I'm going to be continuously late until I can catch up again. But basically, we're going to go over all the books that I read in September and give any recommendations and my thoughts and all of that fun stuff. Let's just jump straight into the video. So these are all the books that I read for September plus 2 that are in my Kindle. Starting off with a few statistics first. I read a total of 9 books. 2 of them were on my Kindle, like I mentioned, and 7 were physical books. 2 books were fantasy, 1 was a thriller, 1 was a historical fiction, 3 of them were romance books, and 2 of them were supernatural romance books. In total, I read about 3,202 pages. So the first book that I read for September is Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. I learned how to pronounce her last name. So this book follows Evie Sage, who is kind of like down on her luck, is trying to look for a new job because she recently lost her job, and so she's just walking through the forest when she suddenly comes face to face with the #1 enemy of the kingdom, which is the villain. And so basically the villain kind of takes pity on Evie's situation and offers her a job as his assistant in this manner. So basically it's Evie's job to take care of everything. She kind of overlooks the staff, overlooks the manor, kind of keeps things running and helps the villain devise his evil plans and all of that stuff. Overall, this is described as a like fantasy meets The Office kind of book, which I can totally see that, but at least for me. Here we go with the review.
Please don't hate me if you love this book.
This book was not for me. I felt like the idea of the book was really fun, and I really wanted to like this book because just all of the elements it had in there just seemed like something I would like to read, right? But I almost DNF'd this like 3 times. So close to just like giving up, but I'm just gonna keep pushing through. I want to know how it ends. And if I'm being very honest, I think the reason I could not get into this is it was a very easy read, yes, but at the same time, I feel like I read as a young adult book, even though it was meant to be an adult book. And I think it's just the overall writing style. I just couldn't seem to like get past it. I don't know if it's a personal preference in that sense or what, but it was just hard to read because of the writing style, which ended up me basically skimming more than half of the book because I just wanted to be done with the book. And I feel like it didn't get interesting until the last like 50 pages because this book actually ends in a cliffhanger. The ending, the last 50 pages, that was pretty interesting. It was like comical enough where it did make me laugh here and there. And like I said, I think I would have really truly enjoyed this book, but it might just be the writing style that was just not it for me. I think that might have been the main issue here. Another thing that I had to pick on with this is that this was also described as a romantasy, which there's hardly any romance in there, which I didn't care. I didn't really care for it to begin with. But if you're expecting this to be like a romantic book, it's not. I think it's supposed to be a bit of a slow burn, which also doesn't really feel like a slow burn, but there's really barely any romance in here. So overall, I'm going to have to give this a 2.5 out of 5. I don't know if I'll read the second book. I had issues with the writing style, and that's something really hard for me to get over to be able to continue reading the series. Putting that aside, so the book I read after that is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. This is a thriller book. It follows the story of Lucy, who is found walking down the street and she's covered in blood, injured with absolutely no memory of what happened. She has no idea what happened to her. She has no idea why there's blood on her. She has no idea where she's at basically. But like soon after, she basically becomes the prime suspect of the murder of her best friend who they found around that area as well. However, there was never enough evidence to charge Lucy for the murder of her best friend, so she's basically kind of let go. 5 years later, Lucy is back in her hometown. There's this true crime podcast that is covering basically the murder of her best friend. The host of the podcast, Ben, is actually trying to figure out what happened to Lucy's best friend. Overall, this book was so good. It was a thriller, it was a mystery without it being dark and uncomfortable. Like, it was still very uncomfortable at times, and it was still dark because we were talking about like a murder, but it wasn't as dark as like a Karen Slaughter book, for example. You just end up feeling kind of icky and you need to watch something happy. Like, I'm not saying that this is happy, it doesn't feel too dark and twisted. The inclusions of the podcast helps kind of release a lot of the tension that the story builds up in a good way though. It was serious without being too serious. There was comedic relief without downplaying the stuff that was happening either. And I just like fully devoured this book. I genuinely thought after Assistant to the Villain I was going to be in a reading slump because I was just not able to read. But I read this so fast. I enjoyed every second and I was genuinely surprised at what happened. And since thrillers, I usually can guess the ending, and this one I was not able to do so. I'm going to give Listen for the Lie a 5 out of 5. I truly enjoyed this book. It was a good read. I'm gonna put it to the side now. So the book I picked up after that was The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. Let me tell you, when I say I was so indecisive to read this book, I was so indecisive to read this book. Like, you do not understand. I was not really in the mood for a historical fiction. I have to be in the mood to be able to read a historical fiction, but it was such a big and daunting book in my TBR that I knew I had to read this early on, because if I left it to last minute, it was going to drag. I'm just like, okay,
I'm gonna pick it up. Let's see what it's about.
I expected it to be somewhat serious because it takes place in World War II, and that's it. I had absolutely no clue what this story is about, just that so many people recommended this to me and that I had 2 people at Barnes & Noble tell me this is such a good book. The Nightingale is the story of 2 sisters, Villian and Isabel, who go through their own respective journey during World War II in France. So we meet Villian talking with her husband, completely terrified that her husband has to go to this war because she remembers how her father came back, and she is just worried and scared for her husband, who has to leave her behind, and their daughter. And so then that story follows Villian having to learn to live without her husband while this war is happening. You have soldiers in her small town and she's just trying to protect the people she loves. So it follows her story as well as her sister's story, Isabel, who is the youngest, and she is absolutely furious with everything that's happening. She also cannot believe that Nazi Germany is taking over, and she just wants to reclaim Paris and wants to be able to support this war in whatever way she can. So then Isabel embarks in her own journey, finding ways to support this war, taking advantage of the fact that she's a woman, so people underestimate her and her abilities. Goes through her own journey of trying to be an asset. When I tell you, this book tore me up, broke me apart. I have not felt so emotional for a book since a long time. I was dreading how big this book was. This is a huge fiction book. Big. I never read such a big fiction book like this before. There are 564 pages, so this was such a daunting read, but as soon as I started reading it, I was hooked. Absolutely just enthralled by the story. Just the storytelling is beautiful, the writing is beautiful. It's just a beautifully tragic story, and it's obviously a fictional story, but it is based on true stories. If you read the author's note at the end, it kind of tells you Kristen Hanna's basically process of getting the information for this book, and it just makes it even more sad in my opinion, because this actually did happen. It's just a very somber reminder of what happened a few decades ago. A very interesting read. It is something that I will be recommending myself. I'm so glad I picked it up. So overall, the rating, I had a hard time rating this book because there were some inconsistencies in the book and some continuity problems. They were very minor, where like I noticed them, but I kind of just pushed them aside. I had such a hard time actually rating it, but I absolutely adore this book. It has a special place in my heart, so I'm going to have to give it a 5 out of 5. Even with those inconsistencies, I am aware of that. But this was just a 5-star book. One of my top books of the year. If you read this, let me know what you think, because I cried so hard. Just thinking about it makes me want to cry again. We're gonna put it down now. Here, let me... Now y'all can see my stack slowly build up. So after that, I obviously needed something to cheer me up. I obviously needed something lighthearted and sweet. I also got extremely sick. I think I had the flu or something, but I was out for a few days and I just could not do anything except literally read. I couldn't leave the house because I was too weak to leave the house, and I was consistently sleeping most of the time anyway. So what did I do? I literally just read anytime I was awake and had the energy to do so. And because I was so sick and so disoriented, I needed very easy reads as well. So I read The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Lori Gilmore. First of all, literally just the author's name, Lori Gilmore. That just screams Gilmore Girls to me. Perfect fall season kind of book. This was also the book I was reading for the book club I'm in. So this book is about Jeannie, who lucky girl got gifted a coffee shop called the Pumpkin Spice Cafe. This used to be her aunt's cafe, but she wanted to retire. Jeannie, after experiencing a little bit of a traumatizing event at work, she decided she needs to slow down, take a real hard look at her life, make some changes, and live in an environment that's not as stressful as what her job used to be. So she takes this opportunity that her aunt basically gave to her and moves to small town Dream Harbor, ready to start her new life. And of course, she meets resident Scrumpy Farm boy Logan, who has his own bits of baggage he needs to work through and is determined not to get swayed by Jeannie's city girl charm, basically. So of course, this is a seasonal book. It is meant to give you all those autumn vibes. It's called The Pumpkin Spice Cafe. So it's a very cozy fall book. It's a cute, grumpy and sunshine book, very low stakes and super easy to read. It made me want a pumpkin spice cafe the whole time I was sick, but I could not leave the house, so I just imagined I had one. It's a cute little romance book. What more can I say about that? I was actually surprised at the spice. I thought it was going to be cute and cozy. I did not expect it to be a little spicy. So there is some spicy cinnamon in there. I don't know why I said that. Overall, I'm going to rate this book a 3 out of 5 with a spice level of a 2.5 out of 5. There was a little bit more spice than expected from a usual romance book. So I was still very much sick during this time and I still needed another easy book to read. So I grabbed Raised on It by Lisa Shelby. This book is about Mason, who does an apartment swap for a few months and moves from Manhattan to small town Eastland, Oregon. And she's doing this because she wants to get inspired for her new book. I forgot to mention Mason is an author and she writes books. So she was actually warned from day one to watch out for Mr. Player Boy, Miles, but she literally meets him on the first day and she cannot help but fall for his charm, because not only is he a player and he accepts that he's a player, but he's also a very genuinely nice guy. Like, he's a really cool dude, basically. So obviously it follows the story of Mason and Miles. So overall, this is a small town romance book. It was cute. It was fluffy. However, I had my ifs and buts for it. I felt like some of the dialogue was a little bit cringy. I'm not gonna lie about that. It did feel a little bit cringy. I don't know what it was. But it was still a sweet story. But I did get annoyed with Mason quite a bit. Actually, Miles was great. And I'm just like, girl, what? I think what made it the most frustrating is the third act breakup, I think it's what it's called, or something like that. I wish we could have seen everything from Mason's perspective instead of Miles' perspective, because it's dual perspective, to see what her reaction was and understand like her traumas a little bit more. Because just seeing it from Miles' perspective, it felt kind of like, but why? Why do that? And so eventually you get explained later on in the book and you kind of understand a little bit more, but I feel like it would have wrapped up a little bit nicer if we were able to see it from her perspective from the very beginning rather than Miles. It was an okay book. It was fluffy, it was cute. So I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5. Camera's heating up, gotta take a break. So finally, after feeling like I didn't have any more snot in my brain, I felt like I could concentrate a little bit more, I picked up Unwanted by Mia Sheridan. This book follows the story of Harper, who is basically summoned to the county jail to see if she can recognize this man that they picked up at the side of the street, because it turns out that there has been 2 murders in her little town. They were both killed the same way, which was with a bow and arrow, and they just happened to see this man walking along the street with a bow and arrow, so they picked him up to question, basically. The reason why they bring her in is because we find out that this man, Lucas, actually grew up in the woods that she is a tour guide for, and these woods are supposed to be these very dangerous areas, super dangerous, very harsh winters and stuff like that, and he has grown there all his life, completely cut out of society. So they ask her if she's ever seen him and stuff like that. She has not recognized him, but she is curious about him, and they eventually bring her in as I want to say it's called a civil consultant, I think. Basically just kind of like get her opinions because she knows the area and all of that stuff, especially since she knows the woods. So it kind of just follows the story of Harper and Lucas, and trying to figure out what happened to Lucas, how he ended up in the situation he's in. It's just a whole mystery of having to figure out who murdered these 2 people, how everything is connected and all of that. Plus there's the romance aspect of it all. I was very much intrigued and fully like just loving this book. I felt like it did such a good job at combining both mystery and romance, which I have not read in a really long time, if I'm being honest. It was just a very shockingly good book, and I was never bored. The romance was really good. The mystery was really good. Together they were really good. Apart they were really good. I enjoyed it. I also feel like the mystery of it all is what gave the characters so much depth. And of course, it's perfect for spooky season because there's like a mystery aspect of fall. We're getting into the winter season in this story and stuff like that. So it was a really good book. I very much liked this book. I was not expecting it to be that way when I first put it on my TBR, so it was a good surprise. So overall, I'm going to rate it a 4 out of 5. And for spice, I'm gonna give it a 2.5 out of 5. Slightly more spice, but it doesn't overshadow the plot. So next, I picked up Witches Get Stuff Done by Molly Harper. So this story follows Riley Everett, who is on her way to Starfall Point to meet an aunt she never knew existed. On her way to Starfall Point, she gets super sick. She's very nauseous because Starfall Point is, I believe, an island in Michigan, I think. She just gets really nauseous. As soon as she steps on the land, she kind of feels some kind of tingles inside her body and stuff like that. Like some kind of magic is flaring up, right? She has absolutely no idea that she even has magic. Once she arrives to Starfall Point, she actually learns that her aunt passed away not that long ago and left her a house to take care of, basically. So she inherits this Victorian house that happens to have a ghost butler and is just completely haunted, and she then finds out that she actually comes from a line of witches and she needs to take care of this house to make sure the ghosts don't go crazy and like haunt people. And of course, it doesn't help that there's a very attractive head librarian that she seemed to completely clash with at the beginning, but is now finding kind of charming. First of all, I just want to say, where are y'all getting these aunts that just gift you things? Because I want to be gifted a coffee shop. I want to be gifted a house. Like, please. I am sorry to say that I caved and joined Audible just to be able to listen to the book, because I almost DNF'd this book as well. I was having such a hard time reading it, and a big part of it was, again, the writing style. And there was a 40-page chapter. I hate long chapters like that, because when I need to stop, I just want to read one more chapter. I'm not trying to read 40 pages of the book. Like, these chapters were absolutely long, and it made it just really hard for me to read. And again, the writing style kind of made it hard for me to read. It's an easy read, but I just, for some reason, it was not engaging enough for me. I, however, did very much like the practical magic vibes it got. I absolutely loved the witchy aspect of it all. I could care less for the romance. I would forget about the head librarian, which I almost forgot to mention in the summary. I just couldn't really care much for that. I really liked more like the idea of the witches and the coven that she was forming and all of that stuff. But like I said, the writing was really hard to get through. So I joined Audible and listened to the book through there, because that's the only place they had it. That's the only reason we finished this book. And because that was the only reason we finished this book, I'm going to have to give it a 2.5 out of 5. I almost did not want to read this anymore. It was just really hard to get through, but it could be interesting. It could be something you might like. Don't let my rating bring you down if you like this or if you want to read something like this. Stack. So after I picked up Gild by Raven Kennedy. This is the Plated Prisoner series, book 1. So this story is a take to the Greek mythology King Midas, I believe that's how you say it. It's told through the perspective of a woman. At least that's how it's described. So it basically follows the story of, I've never said this name out loud. I've always said it in my head. So Oren? Who was golden touched by King Midas and is basically the king's luxurious prisoner. So she is like completely just gold hair, gold eyes. Like she describes herself as fully gold except for the white of her teeth and the white of her eyes. She's just kept in this cage like a bird and can't leave. Quite literally just follows the story of Oren and just her life. Basically how she got there, what's happening after, and what's going on in the kingdom. There's not much of a plot to this book actually. Yeah, this book is basically no plot. There's no plot to this book. Things just happen, but not in a bad way. You could tell this is a setup for the rest of the series. It feels very much like a character establishment and world building. Basically, you kind of are getting the understanding of who these characters are, why they are how they are, how the story starts and stuff like that. So there's no plot, but it's because you're kind of setting up for it. I really hope. I haven't read the other books. That's what it feels like. I feel like I will probably appreciate these scenes later. This is supposed to be, I believe, like a romantasy book, a dark romance book, a dark romance fantasy book, but there's not much romance. It's more of, again, just introducing the characters more than anything in this book. However, there are very explicit scenes that are extremely triggering as well. This is a very triggering book, so please read the triggers. And for that reason, it made it really hard to rate this book because, again, I could tell what this book was trying to do. It was also very, very uncomfortable to read because of that reason as well. Like literally all the men in this world, I just want to like stab. I just want to kick in the balls. Yeah, we'll say that instead. It was just really hard to read this book. However, I still want to continue the series because I feel like the character arc for our main character will be great because of how it started. Like all she can do is get stronger basically. So I really hope that's the case and I'm not just reading something completely uncomfortable. And I'm not going to give it a spice rating because I do not feel comfortable calling it spice. Spice is something that could be enjoyable and this is not. It's more triggering than anything. Let's just say explicit content, very explicit content with triggers. Please look at those. And yeah, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. I feel like this will be a book that I might look back to and be like, wow, I understand why that was needed. But I will not know until I read the rest of the series, and I kind of am curious to see what's going to happen because it does leave in a bit of a cliffhanger. Nothing too dramatic, but I will be reading the series. So 3 out of 5. Okay, and the last book that I read that I actually returned because I got it on Kindle Unlimited is Spookily Yours by Jennifer Chapman. So I'm glad I read this after because I definitely needed something cutesy that will cleanse my palate and make me kind of move on from what I just read. So this story follows Willow, who lives in a small town of witches that's glamored to the human eye, basically. Willow's basically a 20-something-year-old navigating life with absolutely no direction of what she wants to do. She has this big old house that she inherited from her parents. It was for her and her sister. Her parents passed away a few years ago, so she's kind of just like, does not know what to do with her life. One day, she finally decides to adopt a cat after her familiar passed away and decided it was time to move on and adopt a new cat. This cat turns out to be a shadow daddy demon, basically, who was cursed by another witch to be a cat. So our demon and Willow are trying to... What was the demon's name? I forgot the demon's name and I don't have the book. Our demon and Willow are trying to figure out how to uncurse the cat, and it just follows kind of like their little love story and stuff like that. It was super cute, super fluffy, very low stakes book, perfect for spooky season, very, very perfect for spooky season. I loved it. And it's also safe to say that Willow's favorite flavor is pumpkin. Like literally she loves everything pumpkin. And of course loves Halloween because she's a witch. It is a little spicy with again some shadow magic in there, but it's a very easy and cozy read. Very enjoyable, loved it for spooky season, made me giggly and hee hee ha ha. Overall, I gave it a 3 out of 5, and for spicy, I did give it a 3 out of 5 too. It was a lot spicier than the other books that I read, but not super spicy. And that is it. That's all I read for September. Some very good reads, some not so good reads, some spooky reads, some fun reads. If you've read any of these books, please comment down below. Let me know what y'all think. I love to discuss books with people. It's one of my favorite pastimes. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so and you enjoy these reading wrap-ups, or you enjoy reading content or lifestyle vlogs or anything like that, please subscribe. Thank y'all so much for watching. Have a beautiful day, and I will see y'all next time. Bye!